Former Alabama head coach Nick Saban didn't hold back on College Game Day, giving his opinion on tampering and the transfer portal. This is Way Offsides. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever the case may be. Happy Sunday, the first Sunday after the official start of college football. Here we are. A lot has happened in the past 24 hours. I don't know if you guys watched that SMU Nevada game late last night. It was fantastic. It was a very good football game. SMU pulls it out. They're down a couple of scores, and then in that fourth quarter, they just came to life. But that's not what you're here to talk about, is it? You're here to talk about Alabama and maybe even a little Florida State, although we're going to have another video about Florida State later. Yes, the Florida State Seminoles, with the vaunted defensive line of the offseason, took an L in Dublin, Ireland to Georgia Tech, to their ACC counterpart, Georgia Tech. And Alabama fans could not be any more pleased with the result of that football game. But leading up into that game, we had our first rendition, if you will, of the ever so popular College Game Day on ESPN that morning. I got up super early just to watch. Obviously, you've got the same folks as always: Reese Davis, Pat McAfee is back this year, Desmond Howard, Kirk Herbstreit, of course, who FSU fans gave all kinds of hell during the broadcast. But this year, there's a new face, former Alabama head coach Nick Saban. We've all known for years that Coach Sabin was going to do well in broadcast once he actually retired. That was the route he was going to take. He's done pop-ins with ESPN on game day before. He's been in national championship game broadcasts. He's just very, very good at it. He's very good because he's analytical. He did go and pick Georgia to win the SEC and the national championship, but he also, at some point, kind of hinted to the fact that him picking Texas and Georgia to play in the SEC championship game was reverse rat poison for Alabama. He gave some insight into Alabama and what they look like and what he is expecting them to be this year. He did say that he thinks Alabama will make the playoff, that there'll be a 7 seed in the playoff. But he also, in terms of that FSU Georgia Tech game, earlier in the week, Coach Saban was at the FSU practice. And yesterday morning, he said, hey, Georgia Tech is a sleeper. Watch him. It turns out he knows what he's talking about. But the big news coming out of yesterday is Coach Saban's comments on the transfer portal. ESPN got on the topic of transfer portals and tampering, and Coach Saban did not hold back on his thoughts of what happened in Tuscaloosa after he retired. He makes the comments that when he retired, there were legitimate third-party individuals for universities camping out in Tuscaloosa, awaiting the news of his retirement so that 30-day portal window would open and they could start contacting players. They were probably already contacting players. They could start the process of getting guys out of Alabama. A lot of those guys ended up at that Florida State squad that lost to Georgia Tech yesterday. Some of them are at Texas. Some of them are at Ole Miss. Some of them are one's at Auburn. They're all over the place. OSU, of course, with Caleb Downs and Julian Say and Seth McLaughlin, but they can have him. But Coach Saban was very clear about the fact that tampering in college football is a legitimate issue. It's been a legitimate issue. This isn't something that, we don't know about. We talked on our live last week with Ra Thomas, the wide receiver from Georgia who was removed from the team after some charges were filed against him. We're not here to talk about that part, but there was a video that leaked of him discussing Auburn reaching out to him during the dead period and tampering, trying to get him to flip. And you're currently seeing what a school like Auburn is doing in recruiting. They're having an amazing recruiting run right now, which they're not really tampering in terms of high school recruiting. But Auburn is another one of those schools that relies heavily on portal additions, a lot like Ole Miss. So how much tampering is really going on, and how do we regulate that? If what Nick Saban is saying is true, and I lean to believe that he's not joking, he's not being dramatic, he's not a dramatic person. I lean to believe that he's being honest. There were probably people hired by these athletic departments sitting and waiting in Tuscaloosa once they got the word that he was potentially going to retire, sitting and waiting so that they could make first contact with these guys. Lane Kiffin, you follow Lane Kiffin on Twitter? The dude was trolling Alabama fans, posting pictures of him riding around Tuscaloosa in different places. And then they go and pull a guy out of Alabama. So was Florida State doing that? Is that why Nick Saban took this opportunity to bring that up? It's interesting if he did. Very interesting if he did. Now, here's the thing with the transfer portal. Transfers suck. It hurts. It stinks, especially when you lose a guy like, for an Alabama's case, a Caleb Downs, right? Very talented player. But for a team to build an entire roster, maybe not an entire roster, but for a team to build the bulk of their talent on a roster with the transfer portal, it doesn't work. FSU is a great example of that. Ole Miss, yes, Lane Kiffin's gone 11-1 in his last 2 seasons, but has he made an SEC championship? Has he made the playoffs? No. Now, if it ever does work, that's going to open the floodgates to a huge, huge problem in college football, because more and more coaches are going to stop supplementing their rosters with the transfer portal and try building their rosters with the transfer portal. Now, here's the problem with that is now, yes, you can talk to a kid who's in the transfer portal legally. There's nothing wrong with that. But who's to say that, Johnny Yellowwood can't make a call to Ryan Williams and go, hey, we're going to offer you 1.5 mil cash and an endorsement deal. This is a little bit of an exaggeration, but and an endorsement deal to jump in that portal, and then we're going to get you out. If you don't think those kind of deals aren't happening, then you have not been following college football very long, because it does happen. It does happen. And Nick Saban made it very clear that the vultures were circling Tuscaloosa upon his departure. And knowing that and hearing that, it also makes what Kalen DeBoer was able to do in keeping as much of the roster intact as he could even more impressive. Because I'm trying to put myself in the mindset of an 18, 19, 20-year-old kid playing football at a major university under a guy like Nick Saban. And then I get a phone call from somebody who represents Ryan Day, and they want to offer me $1 million to come up to Columbus, another good school. This isn't a scrub school. It's a school that puts guys in the NFL. Or somebody calls me from LSU, somewhere where talent's also developed and goes into the league, and they offer me a huge sum of cash. It'd be hard to say no to that. But that's the current problem in college football. And we've talked about this till we're blue in the face. Ultimately, the responsibility lies with the NCAA to do something about it, to fix it. You have to lay down the hammer. And they've had the opportunity here recently to know it's not tampering, but with the Michigan scandal, to be proactive, to be quick and decisive and authoritative in doing something. Michigan, the regulations that are now on Michigan are coming from Jim Harbaugh and the cheeseburger incident. It has nothing to do with the Connor Stallions gate yet. But the NCAA, in all its weakness, is dragging its feet, doing its due diligence, as they would call it. But really, they don't know what to do. They're not a law enforcement agency. And then you start looking at these bigger brands. The NCAA is not going to bring down the ban hammer on a school like Michigan or Ohio State or Alabama or Georgia or LSU. They'll do it to SMU. But I firmly believe that if we don't get this aspect of college football under control, if we don't build the proper guide rails and parameters, first of all, we're doing an injustice to these young men. A huge injustice to them. We're teaching them the wrong thing. Secondly, it's going to change the sport to something none of us want. It doesn't matter if you are on the side of the fence where you want players to be paid or you don't. The portal and tampering is outside of that, because what they're doing is they're offering to pay players to enter the portal, making phone calls, making under the table deals, right? Yes, players should be paid, or you don't think they should be paid. But when it comes to the transfer portal, there should be no money involved at all. At all. And then the NCAA is taking a step. They're going to close the spring transfer window soon. We've been telling you that for a few weeks. But is that going to be enough to stop the tampering? How do you keep Hugh Freeze and Johnny Yellowwood from calling Orion Williams when they're not supposed to? How do you enforce that? Tell me in the comments below. Tell me what you think. Am I off base here? Is tampering as big of a problem as some people make it out to be? You know, other fan bases are just going to say Nick Saban's whining and crying like he always does. But we'll see what happens when their head coach retires or leaves and that 30-day portal window opens up and they start losing mass amounts of talent. Because for a team not named Alabama, that could be detrimental to the program as a whole. You could kill an athletic department like that. That's all I got. We got another video coming later to laugh at FSU, so be sure to check that one out. In the meantime, you guys know the drill. We do this every video, and I'm sorry, but we have to because it's housekeeping. Please like, hit that thumbs up button, subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave a comment, interact with us. You see the prompt at the bottom. Is tampering only going to get worse? Yes, no, how so? Let me know. Talk to me. I want to hear from you. So as always, we love you. Say your prayers, read your Bibles, wash your hands, horns down. Beat Auburn and LSU and Tennessee too. Roll Tide.